Oh, we're live.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
Is your camera going to stay off?
Is what gonna stay off? My
Your
camera?
camera?
Yeah, sorry. So you can't see me. The way it works, I guess, because it's the integrated camera, is if Google or if Chrome thinks it's using the camera, OBS won't recognize the camera.
Oh my god.
So I'm watching myself right now in like the camera. I can see myself in it. The
Right.
overlay's all set, but you can't see me, so that's cool. Um, oh, that was a flash. Ah. Um, yeah. So I don't know. That's a thing I'm gonna have to figure out a workaround for later. If you want to just like pull up a picture of me and then just imagine the
I'm
mouth
good.
is moving.
Well, I mean, I got the like icon of you right here, so I can see that just fine.
That's fair. Yeah. Um, who are you? That's how I start all of these.
Sure. I'm some wildly emotional dude who overshares on Twitter.
Aren't we all? Um,
I take it to an art form. But no. My name is Joshua Mendenhall. I'm very mostly known as HTTPaladin or just Paladin on Twitter because 2 years ago, 2 years and some change ago, I made a joke with a screen name, and it's gotten way out of hand. It was supposed to be a little like joke over the term white knight or just because like some dude on the internet who tries to tell people to do good and like it's become a joke, an internal joke against me. Um, I'm formerly a graphic designer and writer, and in the past year and a half and some change, that has become me being recognized as a game designer. Despite the fact that I have no actual training, no formal knowledge, I don't really know what I'm doing half the time, and I feel like that's par for the course at this rate.
oh yeah. I there are very few people. I mean, especially in analog, right? Where
Yeah,
there's no degree programs for this. You're lucky if you go and do a bachelor's or an MFA in game design and you have a single class on paper prototyping. That might be like the extent of your formal academic experience with the type of games that we are emotional and shitposty about constantly on Twitter. Um, it's it really is. You just figure it out. You stumble into it, and maybe you burn out. And if you don't, you probably become an expert within the next few years.
I got a friend who's in college right now, and she's aimed herself at working in board games and working in analog game design, and she's going to college for it. And
Where?
I somewhere on the East Coast.
Huh?
Yeah, it's like her thing, the thing that she knows she wants to do. And she's working at a board game company right now, and she had to pick up some side jobs because COVID is messing everything up. But like she's making it happen. And I talked to older people in the design sphere, and they're like, "Yeah, man, I had an improv. It was kind of like a Wild West." I'm just like, I look at that, and I look at her, and I'm like, shit. I fuck. I went the wrong generation here.
I mean, I'm sure she's lovely. I wish her all the best. Having the position I do, which is like I'm not really a designer. Um, I I know people on the various stages of like the creation and distribution chain. Like my bread and butter has absolutely nothing to do with making games. Really, it has to do with selling games and teaching other people games. Um, I know very few people of any stature, really, who seem to have come at this from a formal perspective. Um, to the extent that like I'm a little surprised that you say she's even doing a degree in it because as far as I was aware, there weren't degree granting programs specifically focused at analog. Um, I know people who have emphasized that as like a portion of their education. My friend and zinester in person in our community, um, Mary Georgescu, is at NYU, and she's doing her MFA. I think she actually just finished her MFA, and I know that like a big portion of her work, like by choice, was in analog, but that was also only possible because Luke Crane is an instructor there. Um,
Hmm.
like it's and on the board game side, Gil Hova, who runs like the Ludology podcast and has designed a few board games. But you go to the other coast, you go to USC or something like the other really really big program. I'm scratching my head to think of a single like name recognizable analog designer who teaches there as faculty, let alone that they have a vertical for the thing.
Yeah, it's everything she told me. Like she has other things she does at college, but like her main focus is on game design stuff. Which you're hearing it as someone who's more experienced than me, and you're like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah,
I'm hearing, I'm hearing it going, "What the fuck?"
I mean, it's wild in that I'm both shocked that I haven't heard of it, and I'm shocked that I'm shocked, right? Like, because
Yeah,
on the flip side, like, I so back when I lived in New York, I worked for an organization doing basically what I'm doing now, which is like teaching kids game design, and all the people who did what I was doing were at they were either grads or at some game design program, right? This was like often the first job. It wasn't quite a AAA dev that they wanted to work at, but it was a really good stepping stone. Um, and I remember one of the staff we had, she was working on her second MFA, and her first one was in visual novels, like the Japanese video game style. Like that was her
yeah.
entire first MFA was just VNs. Um, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like that's a huge segment. Um, but it's weird to me that like that's a totally normal thing. There's a VN program at SVA, at the School of Visual Arts in New York. Big school, big program, and board game design, role playing game design, just not there.
Mhm.
But anyway, as someone who, like me, did not come at this from an academic background originally, like how did you fall into this? Because it really is a hobby and a calling that people don't like. Most people don't search out. You just stumble into it.
Yeah. I got into it because I was on Twitter because I live there now. Um, yeah, I say that joke more and more. It becomes less a joke and more just like a statement. I live on Twitter
Mm.
now. Um, and I'm just there as I'm a graphic designer then, just a graphic designer, and I'm just kind of browsing around and talking to people online, meeting more people in the TTRPG sphere, making friends. And I wind up talking to this dice maker who's looking for someone to redo her logo. I didn't get the job. She contacts me a little while later, asking, "Hey, can you make custom numbers for me? I want to get some custom numbers for my dice." And so, like all her dice now, all the custom stuff, all the custom numbers she has are from me. And a few months after that, she said, "Hey, I'm working on this Filipino D&D book. I need a graphic designer. Can you help out with this? Would you like to be interested in that?" And I was like, "Sure, I could use a short-term gig for some money." Yeah, literally the phrase was, "Yeah, I could use some money right now."
And that's Sayonuna?
Yeah, Sina Una.
Sina Una. Sorry. I've
No,
never heard
I
it said.
literally everyone and their mother messes it up unless they like hear an interview or talk to someone else about it beforehand. Um, the like I think we have like a board somewhere on our Discord server about like how people mess up the pronunciation. And what kills us is that like the original word for it is supposed to be one word but pronounced the same, Sina Una. But if you combine the two words, a lot of people pronounce it as Sinana, like sauna,
Huh.
and you still get people who pronounce it like that. And we're like, what the fuck, man? Like we're helping you here. Don't fuck with us. But I started doing that when I had the great idea of just like, hey, why don't I go to Gen Con and talk about the book? because we didn't know anybody. We didn't have any marketing tools. We didn't have any methods of like reaching out to bigger people bigger than us and be like, "Hey, can you help us out with marketing?" So I literally ran around Gen Con 2019 with a little like printout booklet with some information from our book and some art from the book we already had gotten, going around talking to people about what's in our book. From there, I did the same thing at Gamehole Con 2019. Then did the same thing at a Critical Role live
That's
show.
Gamehole
Uh,
is the Minnesota one.
yeah, Upper Midwest.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, did the same thing at Critical Role live show. Did the same thing at Lost Odyssey 2019,
Okay.
and then our Indiegogo campaign ended the Friday morning of PAX U of 2019,
Okay.
and then we just started making the book and became a full-time gig.
I remember that. I mean, that was the last real con, I think.
There was C2E2, but C2E2
Oh,
is like just pop stuff, really.
though didn't C2E2 and PAX U this year occur like at the same time, pretty much?
C2E2 happened in late February, early March,
Oh,
and PAX U
yeah,
was going to be happening tail end of the year.
yeah,
But we're currently living in hell.
yeah. Um, and I
Yeah,
mean, who knows? I think currently is a really optimistic adjective for it. Um, that implies there will be a later when we won't be. I like to think of it as just a
that's
fresh
true.
new hell that'll emerge at some point.
I don't know. I make a joke of it, but it's kind of horrifying when you actually think about it. Because like this year, Murder Hornets was a side thing.
Mm-hmm.
Murder Hornets was a side thing, and the first day of June, the first day of Pride, Ebola showed itself again, and then I didn't hear about Ebola again.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Because
there's
Ebola, who cares? That's nothing.
yeah, there's this guy named Gus Johnson on YouTube. He makes these short video comedy videos, and he had one called "What It's Like Reading the News in 2020." And he like picks up this newspaper, and sorry, he has this piece of paper taped to it. On the piece of paper, it says 7 news articles that are so uh, heavy and bewildering that in any other news cycle would have dominated the timeline for weeks. And his girlfriend comes and goes, "Hey, babe, what are you reading?" And he just goes, "I, I forgot."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's been like in 2020. And like Ebola showed up and went away. Murder Hornets showed up again, only with the news of, "Hey, we killed some. By the way, zombie worms."
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. Like things have always been bad, but not so bad that Murder Hornets hasn't been my sole focus.
I remember this year alone, and it feels like a million years ago, just sitting on Discord watching like riot cams on Twitch, just keeping track of the different cities, just being like, oh shit, New York's popping off. Oh wow, Seattle's getting bad. Just like day after day, and now it's just like that was what I was 12. Like when did that happen? I have no idea.
Yeah, no, I joke about how like, September lasted 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about September and I it's so distant from how I am right now.
If you told me something that happened in September, it could alternatively have been last week or 5 years ago. I have no concept of it.
I heard something the other week that like really fucked with me. There's this meme called there was this news article called "Small boulder size of large boulder obstructs traffic."
Okay.
And I thought, "Aha, I remember that meme. That was real funny." What was that? 2018, 2017? And they're like, "That was February." Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, the before
That's
times.
what we're yeah.
I was
Yeah.
I was going through some DMs just to like get some perspective, like seeing, okay, I haven't reached out to this person since March. What was it like? And so Breakout Con in Toronto was going to be happening in March, and I was planning on going up there. And I just day by day, like late February into early March, just talking to my friend who lives in Toronto, just like, oh yeah, can I totally stay? And they're like, yeah, I mean, it looks like not great, but I'm sure it'll be fine. Like, actually, where do you think you're going to be staying with us? My wife doesn't really feel comfortable with you coming right now. Oh, they just closed the borders. Guess you can't. Just day after day, progressively. more nightmarish.
Yeah.
It's
I
it's a weird time to be in the make pretend fun business.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. I feel at times guilty that my job is just make believe.
Hmm.
Um and like for and like cuz I feel like okay, there's more important shit you should be spending your money on, like your welfare and your life. And then I have friends who tell me, "No, please give us the make believe."
Hmm.
I don't know, it's a back and forth argument with myself and then the people that I peddle products to.
My ethical quandary, and this has been consistently true, but I think it's really stood out this past year, isn't so much like me making a living off of make pretend fun times, because you know what? If the alternative was making a living off of despair, I don't particularly want to make that living. Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I don't know. I I have a hard time wrapping my head around the good of uh, distraction. Um, I'm a person who has always found that even the things that give me joy, I need to find that I'm getting something out of them to make them worthwhile, which is like a pretty messed up, like complex to have, and like a deeply bad outcome of like the capitalist mindset of just like I always have to be productive, I always have to be moving forward in some way. Um,
Yeah.
and that's the part that I find messes with me, where everything is so high stakes, everything is so serious, and my job fundamentally is making people not think about that. Feels a little bit
Yeah.
like enabling the continuation of the downfall through helping people not engage with it. Um, and I don't have a good answer. The only thing I could say is like, well, if they felt the way I did, they wouldn't engage. Maybe they just
Yeah.
need to have a good time.
I I remember I used to be one of those like I used to be one of those arrogant nerds who was like, "Pfft, I read football what? You know the type. You know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what type
Oh
I'm
yeah.
talking
Oh yeah.
about. Those jackanapes. But I don't know. I started watching like I think I saw it from a show or something, but like we use games and shit to kind of just distract us for at least a little bit because thinking about hard stuff constantly will wear you out.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people don't have the privilege of that, but it's nice to be able to have at least a little bit of a ha before you go back to thinking about the absurd and the hard stuff. And it's kind of why people flock to sports and football because it's their version of our games.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a nice little like breakaway from the constancy of everything.
It's why I've never resented my grandmother's gambling addiction. Um, like, is it good for her? No. Is it good for her finances? Absolutely not. Has she had an incredibly difficult, miserable life, and one of the few joys she has is putting coins into a slot machine for a few hours every now and then? Yes, and she should have that. Um,
Right.
it's just in a in an ideal world, I think I think that's why I have a less difficult time profiting off of running games for people than I do selling things to people. Um, because if I'm running games for people, I'm having like an active hand in their enjoyment. Whereas, God, I buy so many games that I never even open. Um, and I don't even know if I can like say that I enjoy buying games anymore. Um, I almost do it out of habit. I do it out of FOMO. Um, the sheer volume of things that I have that have literally never. I have books that not only have I opened and then put on the shelves, I have books that are still in shrink, just sitting on their shelves. My copy of Morkborg is in bubble wrap with the mailing slip in it still. It's never come out of that. It's just on the shelf in bubble wrap. Um, and it's just like, that's the most. I can't even pretend. I can't even lie to myself and say that I forgot about the time that I read Morkborg because I have an ever present reminder that it came out of a box and went onto a shelf, and I couldn't be bothered to take bubble wrap off of it. Um,
Hmm.
that's again very
I
me. I don't know what's
Right.
so we talk not infrequently. And I think
Yes.
that's a pretty recent trend. Some of the people I've interviewed have been people I've spoken to for a very long time.
Yeah.
What's your relation with like game buying?
Um, Relatively new in the sense that like I I had a group of friends and they all like had better off parents than me or were working for longer than me, and for the longest time I just didn't have the notion to buy anything that was physical. Um, and like I played Pathfinder for years, and Pathfinder is free.
Mm-hmm.
Pathfinder is flat out free. So I didn't buy anything ever, and I started playing fifth edition D&D and started doing more stuff in the space, and all of a sudden I could get all these games and justify them because like A, I could play them. B, I work as a layout artist, so if I look at a book and like stuff like that and I find stuff that I like, I can learn from it, and I can see what people are doing in the industry and kind of know what to avoid doing so I don't, inadvertently copy them. So my game buying is mostly rooted in studying.
So that
Um,
transitions me, I think, pretty cleanly to the question I actually wanted to ask, which is like what gets you excited, right? Part of us talking more and more over the past few months has been you doing a very similar project to this one, albeit less of a shitpost
yeah.
one and a more formal one. But like ultimately, we're people talking to game designers and people in games. Like it's kind of always going to be at least a little bit of a shitpost. Um,
Right, right.
but yeah, I mean, a big part of how you have to choose people is who does stuff that gets you excited. And I guess what gets you excited. You start doing lettering and numbering for custom dice, and then you do this project for a 5e book that is like, oh, I'll make a little bit of money, and now you're in this life. Um, there has to be a kernel of some shit that gets you hooked. Um,
Right.
is it just the experience?
Um,
Is there a design element? Sorry, too many questions. What gets you
no,
excited?
it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I I'm very prideful. I have a very large ego that I try and keep maintained. In that I really like doing stuff that I know for certain someone else wouldn't do.
Okay.
Um, which works against me because, like as you mentioned, we're working on kind of similar projects. Um, yeah, it works against me sometimes. I have verifiable proof of that via you. Um, but no, it's just I find that people a lot of the time people are doing more or less the same stuff without ever really advancing anything in particular. And I've been into games since I was 3. I've been playing games since I was 10. Um, and like I don't know, I know you don't pay attention to like D&D discourse, but like there was a talk a little bit ago about like role playing versus like playing for numbers and optimizing, and how if you're going for one, you can't do the other,
The
and
classic
how
ROLE versus ROLL playing.
yeah, yeah. And like I have lived through that debate for the past 17 years on and off through different people saying the same exact things and the same exact arguments with maybe a few words changed, and I'm so fucking exhausted by it. I'm so tired of it. And I look at these people who I do respect talking about this. I'm just like, you could be doing so much more right now. You could be doing literally anything else other than just going into the shit fit that will show up in about 4 years like a fucking curse.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Um,
you mentioned that I don't pay attention to the D&D discourse, which is absolutely true. Um, but I think in large part because I came out of it, right? And I think there is
mhm.
a whole generation of us who my first forum experiences really were like the Wizards of the Coast forums. Um,
Ooh, I had Giant in the Playground.
okay, fair. And yeah, I mean, it's you just see the same conversations happen again and again, and to the
Hmm.
point of there is more interesting work to be done. There are more interesting narratives and visual narratives. There are more interesting aesthetics to put out into the world. I often feel like there is most of us start in the same place. We start in the trad world, um, and some people find it very comfortable there. Some people find it very lucrative there. But I think there is an escape velocity that some people attain and most people don't, where they slingshot out of that space into
Hmm.
like not necessarily a better world, right? When I look at like how to make money as a game designer, I am still making residuals off of a 5e product I put out in 2014. I have made, I have to assume, somewhere like $80,000 off of that book.
Holy shit.
Yeah, yeah, it's insane. It's still my number one source of income when it comes to anything game related I have ever done. I'm not particularly proud of that book. I think it's fine, but that's the marketable difference in the space. Is just you do something interesting with 5e and you have legs. Or you can rock it out and you could do something insane. You could like become king of the itch games, and
Yeah,
I
like my
think,
answer.
oh yeah. Well, so I think, yeah, there is every now and then the chance that you hit escape velocity, do something more interesting, and hit it big in a really lucrative way. But I feel like
Hmm.
by and large, the Lancers just don't exist. They're almost mutually exclusive. Which isn't to say you can't make a living off of it. It's just a very different type of living. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I
But
have this.
to answer your,
Oh, sorry. You go,
sorry,
please.
I was going to say to answer your question more directly, I just, I like finding things that don't exhaust because becoming more and more rare sometimes.
Yeah.
Where like, I don't know, I worked on Sina Una, which was, I had to do a lot of research into pre-colonial Filipino culture mythology, which there's no short-term term for that, which aggravates me because it's a mouthful. Um, but I looked up into like non-Western thought. I had to look up very old texts. I had to deal with a lot of racism inherent in my ancestors
Hmm.
because it was there. Um, did a lot of like really new, interesting shit. And then I glance over back to the left, and I see people making yet another not Europe setting,
Hmm.
and I'm just like, ah, fucking god damn it. And then like I don't know. I'm working on a new book right now, and I spent, I think, 5 hours yesterday reading up on why deities sometimes change names. How, like, culturally they might have the same deity, but they'll be called certain things or be interpreted differently. And then I look back over, and people are talking about, role playing ROLE versus role playing ROLL.
Yep.
And anything that is just weird and requires a lot of research or is just different gets me really excited because at this point I feel like I've seen a lot of stuff. I was watching a video the other day for a work task, and I was watching this video from these very big YouTubers. I'm not going to name them because like that would be rude at this point because I don't like their videos. Um, but they were talking about how to make your own homebrew world, and I watched approximately 15 seconds of it because in the first 15 seconds they said, when making your own homebrew world, you don't have to base it off of Faerun or the Forgotten Realms, but sometimes you can base it off of Faerun or the Forgotten Realms, which is like saying like sometimes water is hot and sometimes it's cold,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I,
that stuff kills me.
I
I,
very first Gen Con I ever went to, I attended a panel that was like designing better worlds or something like that, like some world building panel. And the bulk of the panel was just people talking about, yeah, I mean, I just built my world because I really like Japan, so I thought, what's some cool Japanese shit? And it was just like five older white dudes just being like, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I think Africa's just a cool country. Um, so I just took some stuff from Africa and put it in my world and thought that would be tight. And I was just like, not a country. It's continent, lot of countries, in lot of different. Um, I can't. I don't even know. I have no. I have nothing I can say. Like when you're starting that far off the mark, um, all I can kind of do is
yeah,
just be like, "Fuck, man, you're gonna sell some shit, and I'm not gonna buy it, and I'm gonna go to the other places that are doing more interesting stuff, and I'm gonna patronize more interesting work, which I
yeah,
hate because I just want to pound into them, just be like, come on, do better. Just it benefits us all if you do better.
yeah. And I see a lot of people putting in like very minimal effort sometimes, and it's disheartening. I I remember I was at GameCon and I got introduced to this other company through an acquaintance of mine, and she said, "Hey, this guy's working on some Filipino stuff. You guys are looking for some Filipino stuff too, right? I said, yeah. Do you know about it? I'm like, yeah, man, I know a lot about it. And I look at their stuff, and I realize, oh no, I don't want to be involved with this. This is the fucking worst.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing is going to be more cathartic relief than never getting an email from either of them.
Mm-hmm.
I could have really used the work money, but in the long term, I'm glad my name isn't attached to their products.
Yeah. It. I'm glad for you because I know a lot of people who have early on in their careers not known the space well enough and not known where to look and where to ask to avoid really, really nasty pitfalls like that, which to insiders
Yeah,
seem obvious, but are just, oh yeah, someone wants to pay me $1,000 to do some work. That sounds amazing. And you do some surface level digging, and they seem okay, and then it's just ugly, and that ugliness haunts you in a niche as tiny as ours. Um,
yeah. Like I, before I started working in the space, I was working as a graphic designer, and like I was doing logos for like $15. You see some real shitty stuff when you're working as a freelancer in any field. And so I had that kind of cynicism about doing work for other people already in me before I started talking to people in the industry, which I'm really thankful for at this
yeah,
point.
it benefits you. It benefits you in a big way. Um,
Oh yeah. Oh
so
yeah.
I want to take a step back
Sure.
to. I think there's an important uh, distinction between a bunch of different things that we kind of conflate into one of the less interesting versus more interesting work. And I think there are a lot
Sure.
of axes that we've already kind of touched upon in the various ways, right? There's intellectual inquisitiveness. Do I want something that looks like something else? Um, there's aesthetic inquisitiveness, right? There's this layout has been done to death. Do I just want to use the template provided by X, Y, or Z company? Which I think is a big problem in, say, the D&D Beyond space. There are a lot of products that I think could be very interesting, but look the same, and so become indistinguishable. Um,
Hmm.
I think there's mechanical distinctions, right? And I think all of these things, we have the common approach of just like, well, D&D bad, right? It reinforces all these terrible things, which I think misses the point of, as you said, Pathfinder's free. 5e is widely available. I could be looking at the next brilliant, inquisitive, interesting game designer in an aisle at a hobby store, and they have the only thing they see is the Call of Cthulhu 7th edition starter box, and they see the big three, the DMG, PHB, and Monster Manual, and they might see Pathfinder 2 and like maybe one Evil Hat game, maybe like Blades in the Dark or something, and that's their entire exposure to the landscape. Um,
Yeah.
and I think we have this very reductionist approach to, well, if that's all you know, you suck. Um, as someone who came out of that world, and I mean, I think this is one of the bigger distinctions between us, and I think why I'm really interested to see your project is, having interesting, inquisitive conversations with people who operate in a side of the hobby that I just don't engage with anymore, right? The
Hmm.
core D&D space. How do you see people distinguishing themselves without completely escaping the ecosystem?
Um. So I think the biggest one I have is that they're doing stuff that they personally like instead of worrying about a broader appeal.
Okay.
Um, Lucia, the other person who's in charge of Sina Una, the person who is actually in charge of Sina Una, I should say, told me before I went to Gen Con that as long as people saw that how much I like D&D, I would be fine, you know. And that kind of translates into, I spoke to someone who works on the DM sphere, who made some cat supplements. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they're jokey, they're not like overtly serious, but it's just a bunch of like cat creatures of different variances and different types, and she really likes it. It was fun for her. She makes a good amount of money from it, just because like people are like, oh man, cats, sure. But then I see people, but like what I'm not talking to are the people who are like, welcome to the next grim dark setting, mankind's last bastion against the infernal darkness. Because like if I say that, you have no idea who I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
There's no distinction at all. I think I saw 20 of these campaigns like in 2019
Oh yeah.
that blur together.
Hmm.
You know, I saw one this year that stood out, and it stood out because they had the both the bravery and audacity to make like a $700 tier where the main draw was a custom made Italian leather book of their book. Um,
I mean, that
and
sounds
just
rad, but I love.
oh, it's rad as shit. Like of all the things, that is the most rad.
Hmm.
Um, because it's so unnecessary and it's so extra, and I really love it.
Hmm.
Um, but just people who found enjoying what they were doing and just made it. Like I interviewed Daniel Fox, who markets his book as Grim and Perilous,
Hmm.
and I talked to him about like what's it like having part of your audience that you just don't like,
Hmm.
because you know the kind of audience he draws. He draws a lot of like people who think that his book will justify their
Yeah, I
very
mean,
anti people
when you
behavior.
when you make a thing like Zweihander, you're gonna naturally pull in some people who are essentially like Lamentations of the Flame Princess adjacent, right?
Oh, I actively don't think about RPG.
I know, right?
Fuck.
But it's in
Oh my
there, and
god.
and it's still
Yeah.
it's shockingly still profitable. Shockingly,
Yeah.
still does well. I mean, it's not. Uh, do you know My Frog? Are you unlucky enough to know My Frog?
I'm unlucky enough to know my frog.
Cool. So it's not My Frog. It's not ACKS Adventure of Conqueror King system, the one that was designed by Milo Yiannopoulos' lawyer. Yeah, fun factoid there. Macris was Milo's lawyer. Um,
I haven't thought about that dude
yeah.
in years.
But at the same time, right? There is this whole world of in just insipidly samey, edge lordy crap that blurs together in almost every possible way and just creates this amorphous blob of I don't want to be there. Um, and I think yeah, I think there's always a risk of that, and it's interesting to see who courts that space and why, right?
Yeah.
You you were the one who just got all of the Shadows of Esteren books, posted that on Twitter.
Yes, that. Yeah, that was me. I just got. I backed the Kickstarter. I've always been a fan of it because I saw it at like Gen Con 2019. I thought it was beautiful because I was picking up some other book they had made.
Hmm.
Uh, Another book for 5e, which distinguishes itself from other stuff because it's fucking beautiful.
Hmm.
Like gold foil on the pages, really nice, intricate watercolors, beautiful stuff. But yeah, I picked up Esther. I backed the Kickstarter. I got half the shipment already. Other half's coming in March.
See, that's one of those things where like Esteren is a game I like a lot. Um, it's very trad, but it's also very pretty, and I think a very interesting take on dark trad fantasy. But at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
it is only half a step removed, along with things like Symbaroum from the I think it's Free League now. I don't think it was
Yeah.
originally, but like,
Yeah, it was originally was Yarningen, and now it's
thank you.
yeah, that's Free Like Gun or Free League.
Yeah,
Um,
those.
those two in my mind are distinguished from the rest of the grim dark fantasy because like I used to dwell on 4chan a lot on the TG boards
Mhm.
because like I was a youth once, um, and they talk about how there's different versions of dark, and there's like grim dark, which is like Warhammer 40k, and what people naturally revert
Sure,
to, but there's like this genre called noble dark, which is like things are bad but they could be better.
totally.
You
And I mean,
know?
I guess what I'm trying to point out, and feel free to disagree entirely, is that
Sure.
to a lay audience, right, to someone who these terms seem like they're making distinctions without difference. Um, when I look at something like Warhammer Fantasy, right? Well, it entirely depends on what portion of the universe I'm looking at, right? If I'm looking at 40k, okay, yeah, it's pretty objectively grimdark. There's no noble dark to it, and when it is in little bits, it's pretty fascist noble dark. Um, like, but I can very easily point out portions of the Warhammer Fantasy universe that could be noble dark or grimdark. Um, I could, without almost any modification, take a Symbaroum setting and turn it grimdark. Um, And I think there is this space of games to the dark side of Forgotten Realms, right? If we position Forgotten Realms here, there is the darker and the lighter, and I think to a lay audience, largely people who just have exposure to maybe Pathfinder and maybe 5e, it is all kind of a blur over in that side, um, which makes me interested as an insider to see the distinctions between them, because I think you're right.
Hmm.
Esterin is markedly different. Symbaroum is markedly different. Not necessarily because of their settings, but because of the tone they choose to strike. And it's nice seeing people play in that kind of liminal space between these things. I don't really have a point.
No, I think like I think at some point when you get so into games, you start to see the different shades of gray. But two people who are coming into the hobby fresh will see like there's 5e and then there's a scary shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know? What baffles me is when you go to the opposite side of it, where like you get some things that are like positive, and when it's not automatically dismissed as like for kid shit. Um, there was this book that came out a little bit ago this year called Eyes Unclouded. It was a D&D thing put
Is
on
that the
DMs Guild.
Studio Ghibli one?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
inspired by a lot of Studio Ghibli aesthetics, and I got it. I like it. It's really fun. I genuinely enjoyed it, and I watched all of Studio Ghibli stuff as a result because I was like, I want to relive all this stuff because it was really homely. I felt really good.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it, and then I remember the discourse around where people were going like, "This won't sell," or "You can't make this for D&D." And I'm like, "Fucking why not?"
Mm-hmm.
If you can make 20,000 supplements about how masturbatorily dark your setting is, can I get a fucking break, please? Is that allowed?
So that does lead into an actual question that I have, which is, at what point, and this may not even be an answerable question now that I'm forming it in my head, but at what point do you think is it less productive to stay within the originating trad community that you came out of, wherever it was, than it is to break out and become part of another community? And I guess this is answerable differently from a financial standpoint as it is from a originality of voice standpoint. Right? I think about that Studio Ghibli book. I also think about things like do you know Mim's Recreational Garden?
Yes.
Yeah, so I
Yes,
think
I
of
do.
like Mim's Recreational Garden or any of Nate Treem's stuff. Like What Child Is This? Is like a 5e adventure, but it's goofy as hell. It's one page and it's about the baby Christ basically. Um,
Yeah.
at what
I
point
think
does it behoove you just to separate?
I think when you're no longer having fun with it,
Fair.
or when it's starting to cost you more than what you actually make, like you're making a whole bunch of money, but your mental health might be in the fucking gutter.
Mm-hmm.
I think when it becomes no longer just fun, or if the stakes you've put into what you do have become more detrimental to you than a benefit. I like working in the 5e space. I
Mm-hmm.
love talking to people who I talk to. I like making shit posts. My best tweet was me just going was me talking about how like if you say there's at least one mimic in the world, your players are going to become more and more fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And that got like 5k likes. I like doing dumb shit. But if me going into this space had me more battered than having successes, or because I'm so invested into it, if it became detrimental to me to remain in here, I should fucking leave.
Mm-hmm.
And either do something else entirely or just go to a different system. At the end of the day, the only reason why I'm in 5e stuff is because it's so popular. If I could get, if I could have the same kind of, productivity working in other games, a heartbeat, I'd switch because it would be fun for me doing something new. You know,
So, do you consider yourself like a 5e insider?
uh borderline.
Okay,
Like I talk to a lot of people who are on the inside. I talk to people who are on the inside, but like they all respect the NDA life,
sure,
so I can kind of tell when stuff is going to start going down. But like I never know about it before it goes down.
fair. Um,
Um, the extent of what I know is what has been said in confidence in some of the interviews I do, but I scrub those of all private stuff if it's already made public because like courtesy
sure,
and respect.
yeah. general interview practices. Um,
Yeah, basic human decency.
yeah. Um, I guess to rephrase that question, not so much are you a WotC insider, right? Which I think is the world of privileged information and the NDA world and things like that. So much as like the locus, right? The global center of your community is D&D 5e as opposed to the kind of broader, more amorphous all the other games of the hobby, right? Which
Yeah.
isn't to say that I don't think you engage with that space at all, because I think you do.
I, as a side note, I'm intimidated by that space. Like
It's yeah.
I follow a bunch of like indie designers and a bunch of like one-page RPG designers and a bunch of itch designers and people who make these like very interesting and fun things that are just by themselves. And I'm so intimidated by
Mm-hmm.
them. I think they're all so much smarter than me. Because all I've done is just like, yeah, I bought the linguistic stuff from other 5e stuff to create something new. Whereas they're making like very wholly new shit, which requires a lot more brain power than I've ever put into stuff.
I mean, I get the perception as someone who has made the transition from one world into another. I just think it's different modes of thought. Um, I know people. I'm very good friends with people who make genius, brilliant shit. And if you ever tried to sit them down, if you gave them $1 million to make like a core book, like a 500-page core
Hmm.
book, they'd just be lost. It's alien to them as a mode of operation. Um,
See, that makes me feel bad because my mode of operation is to just make very large books.
I get it. I think it's it's a it's a linguistic problem in my head. I I don't. It would be like me saying that all film is the same and that anyone who is able to control a $300 million MCU project should also be able to design a small art house film. They're not. They're vastly different skill sets. They're different
Yeah.
ways of thinking about an entire medium. Um, and we have those terms in other media, right? I don't. A novelist and a poet can overlap, but they're fundamentally different types of writing. Um, we don't have that distinction in role playing games, and I think it leads to a lot of uh, unnecessary combativeness. I think it leads to a lot of kind of ugly thinking about what is productive use of time in the space, what is interesting art. Um,
Yeah.
because it's just misidentifying that we actually exist in related but separate categories.
You know what like really got me when I started like looking for people to interview for my book was I started looking around and asking, and I spoke to one person who works in D&D space. And was like, oh hey, I mean, if you have anybody you recommend, let me know. And I recommended some people, and the games they have made weren't like TTRPG stuff like I'm accustomed to, where you make a character and you replace the character with your stats and scores and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But you were still playing a game where you took on a role where you play at a table, and that really threw me for a loop that I was like kind of limiting myself because I only saw TT like tabletop games as like a very narrow thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Well, I mean,
Um,
that is
and that
a line that's blurring every day more and more.
oh yeah, but it's also a line I drew in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
and separated myself. Like I can see, like I'm still very much afeared of any designers. I think there's some very brilliant people in that space. Um, but before working on this book, I was like, I can never do what they do. They're actual designers, you know.
I mean, I get it. I do, and I get it from a weird place, which is that I've edited across the spectrum, and so I've seen not only what the finished products look like, but I've seen a lot of the like draft versions of things. I've seen that from like an ideation standpoint, they come from very different places. Um, but again, I think it's just a categorical distinction that we lack in our
Mhm.
vernacular. Right? If I took Epodiah Ravicol, who did Dread or Wolfspell, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna give you $5 million to make the next Gloomhaven, I don't think he could do it.
Right.
Or if I gave, anybody really, and if I take Monty Cook, right, one of the most productive strat designers probably ever, from both output and number of like different lines he's run or worked on, and I'm like, hey, make a weird indie game. I know that the best he's got in him is Invisible Sun, and that's not even like, yeah, it's neat. It's a really interesting experiment in like high price point market, and like what's people's how many bits can a traditional RPG player deal with in their game. Um, but I look at that and it's basically just mage, like old White Wolf mage. Um, it's not that far out. Um, Most people just aren't the Greg Staffords of the world. Most people don't have that range in them, and that's fine. It just, yeah, I don't know. Going all the way back to where I started this question, which is, do you see yourself as a D&D insider? You know, the reason I'm interested in that is you're fairly new to this space.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I asked what gets you excited. I think the counterpoint to that is, as someone who's new and doesn't have, 20 years of watching this space evolve, what looks like is on the horizon for you? Is it the type of things that get you excited? Is it in a different direction and you're not as thrilled about it? Um, I assume it's somewhere in between.
Um. So, trying to think how to respond to this. So, like, I think I've only ever run one of the D&D adventures.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm currently running the vampire one, but like we're very recently into it.
Strahd?
Yeah, Strahd.
Yeah.
I waited until the revamped version came out because like I wasn't gonna deal
Mm.
with all the bullshit.
That big
Um,
tombstone shaped box.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I got the big tombstone shaped box, but I also got like the Beetle and Grimm box.
Oh, dang.
Um, yeah, turns out tax writable.
Smart move.
Yeah, because both game design and layout artist, it's
Yeah.
really interesting to study both these things from project perspective and layout. But I got both. Um, but these are the only D&D adventures that I've actually done. I've had the other ones, but like I haven't run them. I just kind of read them and studied them. Um, and so what makes me excited is like figuring out what I could do that's different. Which unfortunately is sometimes very easy
Hmm.
to do. Um, right now I'm working on a book about how to play as dragons in D&D in 5e, which for some reason hasn't already been done.
Like as full ass dragons? Because, I mean,
Like full ass
Dragonborn.
dragons, like full ass dragons with like class levels,
Hmm.
where your class is like a dragon specific class. Hasn't been done before for some reason, but I'm working on it with 2 Cent Gaming. Um, but I'm working on a book I'm pitching over to Hit Point Press right now, which no one has done anything like this because they want to focus on grimdark stuff or fixing problems that are currently in D&D, and I don't really have the bandwidth to fix problems inherent in D&D aside from like advancing what D&D can do or what can be presented in D&D. Um, and then past that, I want to do an adventure which won't bore me to tears because again, it takes a lot. It takes a lot these days to not bore me, which is very egotistical to say, but I can't phrase it any other way.
It's don't I can see how it sounds egotistical to you. It is the natural state of affairs. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know anyone in this hobby at any side of it, as an owner of a FLGS, as a producer, as a publisher, whatever. Most of what you see is boring in some way or another. And it's not that the thing is intrinsically boring. It's just once you've seen enough of it, you realize how many roads get retread.
Yeah, that's yeah, because like I have of course listened to pop music. Everybody has. You can't avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
But after a certain point, all Taylor Swift songs sound the same.
Mm-hmm.
There's the pop bop, and then there's the ballad.
Mm-hmm.
And after a certain point, they may as well only be 2 songs, just remastered and re-recorded at different years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it kind of blurs together in your mind, and I feel I have some level of worry because like I've only been in this space for like a year and a half, 2 years, and I can tell that like in the future, more and more of these years are going to blur together by what's released.
And they do.
Um,
I I
yeah.
wish I had a more positive message for you. Um, they do. I have been in this space professionally in some capacity for nearly 8 years now,
hmm
which is insane. That's but not, that doesn't sound right. It should be like 3. Um, but I don't know if every 2 to 3 years I just completely flip over. Um, the person I was, the things that got me excited, the reason I first got into this space, like I first got into this space because I discovered Numenera, the core book, in a
hmm
store, and like was so hype on it that I basically just forced my way into working on it. And I am going through the process of selling all my Numenera books now.
Oh.
I don't I'm done. Like I love the people who made that game. There is always going to be a place in my heart for that game.
hmm
I look at that shelf and I just go, I'm never going to open you. I'm never. You're just going to get old and sad, and then one day I'm going to give you to a thrift store. Um, like at least I can sell them to somebody now, and maybe they'll be where I was 8 years ago. Um,
I So a fun point to that is that my dad is one who got me into TTRPGs, and he got me into it by telling me about how he started playing them
mhm,
and what he played. And like he played Shadowrun, he played Mutants and Masterminds, he played Champions. But D&D was the primary thing, and like I think now to my days in Giant the Playground, and I think about all the knowledge I have stored somewhere in my head about 3.5 D&D and the bullshit fiesta that is 3.5 D&D. Um, and I love it. I loved it. I'm so enamored by it. I miss those days fondly because I had a bunch of people that I really enjoyed playing with. But after a certain point, it just felt like I was going around in circles and doing nothing.
mhm,
Like, I don't play World of Warcraft anymore. I used to a lot.
mhm.
But whenever I play nowadays, because side note, I have an account for World of Warcraft that's subscribed until 2048.
How?
My account got hacked and was going to be used as a mule to transfer over goods, and then they were going to delete the characters. I got my account back before they sent off all the stuff from my characters.
Mhm.
So I had literally millions and upon millions of gold's worth of stuff on me, and eventually, with that gold stored up and those goods stored up, they introduced WoW tokens.
Mhm.
We could buy a token for some amount of gold, like 14,000, and get a month of subscribe time. I spent most of my gold on WoW tokens because I thought it'd be really funny.
Mhm.
Um, so I've got a WoW account that is subscribed until I die, essentially. Um, but I don't play anymore because whenever I go into that, I think of all the friends I used to play with, and it's lonely.
Mhm.
Um, and I used to play 3.5 D&D on forum sites. I used to play with a guy who went blind and just wanted to stop using the internet because of it. Which I can't fault him. I can't blame him. But now whenever I think about playing 3.5 D&D, I think about my friend who went blind and lost and didn't want to play games anymore with me. So like, I don't know. When I think about 3.5 D&D, I don't want to think about that with 5e,
Mhm.
but I know it might happen at some point, and so I'm trying to keep things as fun as I can before something like that might happen.
Here for a good time, not for a long time, right? Like
Yeah.
it's if you're looking at a particular IP or a particular system as a lifelong partnership, this hobby ain't for monogamy. It's not
Yeah.
sustainable. You're gonna get bored. You're gonna roll over in bed one day and look at that core book and just go, "I hate you."
I'm hoping it doesn't happen for a long time, and I'm really hoping that the stuff I do is going to keep me entertained for a long time because I have to learn about some really odd shit sometimes.
Oh, totally. And I think the thing you've said that makes me, yeah, I mean, I get how it could be troubling, right? That could be on the horizon. I'm much more worried for people when the thing that really gets them going are the mechanical intricacies of a system, because eventually you will run out. Um, but if what you're interested in is like essentially research, right, and digging and pulling up new information that can inform games in new directions, well, in a sense, you're not really wedded to system. System is merely your jumping off point. Um,
Yeah.
like it, history could be rewritten, right? Some supervillain could just excise WotC out of the universe. It will never have existed. No one will remember it. And for people who have only spent their time with tinkering with D&D as a mechanical system, well, there's going to be a huge void for them. And for you, what you
Yeah.
do and what seems interesting to you could very easily exist on any other system substrate. Um,
On some level, I really don't care about the particular system I'm in.
yeah.
Because I was having to do this kind of weird research back when I was playing like Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm.
You know, numbers are on some level easy to figure out. Um, Figuring out interesting shit is much harder. I talk about it in some of my talks about Sina Una, but I spent a month tracking down a very rare and out of print book in the Philippines called the Soul Book
Okay.
to learn one bit of information.
Yeah.
Like only a few hundred copies in existence, and I had to track one down. I spent a month tracking it down. I have the PDF. I found the paragraph I needed, and then I just have this book now.
I mean, that what you just said could have been true about you making some weird itch game. It could have been true about you making some huge Call of Cthulhu campaign. It could
Yeah.
have been true about virtually any game under the sun. That you made this for 5e seems completely incidental to both the reason and the means of making it.
Because I don't know, I read some of these books, and it's very clear to me that some people who make these official D&D books aren't putting in as much effort as could happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't know why. I'm never going to dwell on why they aren't trying hard enough or why they did it in this particular way. It could be any number of reasons, both good or bad. But what I kind of can focus on is how can I find new shit to make myself entertained and to bring into the people. Like for this current book that I'm working on a pitch for, I think so far the things that I've had to research, I said to someone last night. Um, I sorry, I have to figure out where I put it. There it is. Um, Things I've figured out so far. Let's see here. My to-do list is researching tech and how it spreads. Because like when light bulbs became a thing, they weren't automatically taken to everywhere possible because
Sure.
electricity was hard to spread around. I'm studying the Industrial Revolution and their business practices to figure out where it all went fucking awry.
Mm-hmm.
um, Figuring out how when cities become more and more of a powerhouse instead of just a place where people happen to be a lot, why they get more and more populated. And for that, I'm saying like things in like with like Tokyo, why people here in
Sure.
the countryside are just flocking to Tokyo in mass droves. Um, I'm researching how faiths kind of evolve or get stamped out. Um, and then I'm worrying about mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And this was fun for me. But I don't know anybody else who's putting in who I don't know a ton of people who are putting in a bunch of research like I am. I blame Sina Una for this,
Yeah, I mean,
hands down.
it's as an initial project, one that requires the depth of research, I would say is uncommon. Um, I here's my personal take, which could be completely off base and very likely is. Um, the people who are generally willing to put in that much work are not putting that much work in on the lore front. Um, or when they are, those people tend to be narrative designers at big video game companies. Um, in analog, people who put in that much time seem to put it into systems rather than into mechanics. Um,
I put so much effort into this kind of research because like I can only really comfortably do narrative and lore stuff.
fair, yeah.
I'm picky when it comes to mechanics sometimes.
And I don't think that's bad or wrong, right? If anything, I think that kind of gives you a leg up in a lot of ways. What? Oh, no, that was weird. Um,
I mean, I'm assuming you have more experience than me, so what I'm hearing, I'm assuming what you're saying is true. So I'm going to interpret all of this as I'm an exception to the rule, and therefore very alone.
I mean, exceptions to the rule are generally alone, but they also have the benefit of kind of having their business covered, right? Like you have a space. It is not one that many other people occupy. I think there are really detailed worlds out there. Obviously, there are. Most of them are
Hmm.
pretty samey. Most of them are pretty like Faerun-y, and most of them are utterly boring. But when it comes to people who put in vast amounts of research into basically story bibles, um, I see that less and less in the analog space. I see those people much more often working in video games or in, I don't know, television. You see a lot of big story bibles coming out of like expansive TV series and things like that. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and I
I think
don't
that
know
kind
when
of
that
comes
happened.
from. I think that kind of comes from just the fact that like you can't really engage with like movies and TV shows and stuff like that as you can with like RPG stuff. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think lore. I mean, RPGs obviously have a very complicated history with lore, right? I think what you are doing now, you would have been one of countless people. You would have been a dime a dozen in the mid '90s.
Hmm.
Um, when I look at like what came out of like the old World of Darkness, right, and the sheer volume of lore that came out of those splat books, um, not all of it good by any means. A lot of it utterly bad and distasteful, um, but like still huge amounts of it, and some of it quite rigorously researched. Um, I think there has just been a trend away from that over the past 10, 15 years of the interest for that kind of lore getting narrower in role playing games. And as that happened, the
Hmm.
people who have the skill to actually execute on it finding more lucrative avenues to do it. Um, which, I mean, leaves you in a position where, I don't know, you're one of a handful of people in that very specific business right now, which ain't so bad for you.
I mean, it doesn't sound like it at all because like I'm thinking about it now. Like all the things that people are like really gung ho for are like Greyhawk or Dark Suns or Planescape,
Mm-hmm.
and that stuff came out in the 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
The last new thing that came out for D&D was Ebron. That was like 2003, 2002.
yeah. Um,
Um,
I guess if you count the Magic the Gathering crossover one.
I
Um,
don't. I very viciously don't. I'm. I love some of the weird stuff that comes into D&D because of Magic the Gathering, but I can't tell you how much self-indulgence I feel viscerally feel whenever I look at one of the Magic the Gathering D&D books.
yeah.
It hurts quite a lot. I don't know why.
I mean, it is
Um,
the most rank corporatism that I think I've seen out of WotC in a very long time. Um,
I mean, what I'm looking forward to the most is seeing D&D and Magic the Gathering really complete the Ouroboros cycle.
totally, just two snakes eating each other's assholes out. Um, that's the logical conclusion. Um,
Mhm. Um, yeah. God, you're not wrong. God.
that's the future we've got to look forward to.
Yeah, no, because I looked at one of them. I got one of them, and I was just like, "This is really cool. I wonder where they got this from." Because I didn't know the Magic the Gathering book,
Mm-hmm.
and I looked at it. I looked at it, the book. I looked at the source of it, and I was like, "Oh, damn it!
Yeah.
This is really cool, though. That feels wrong."
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm just waiting for WotC to buy Chaosium and put out a Fiend Folio that has the Cthulhu stuff back in it.
I
Really
tell you,
bring us back.
actually, I have a copy of the Fiend Folly that still has Cthulhu in it.
Nice.
And Elric.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh yeah, because there wasn't just Cthulhu.
Nope.
It was a double lawsuit.
Great times.
Oh god, I
Miss
love that
those
book so
days.
much. I love that book so much.
It's such a goofy book.
Mm-hmm. It's also with a very, very second edition art style,
Yeah.
which a little off nowadays.
Little off, but I don't know. I still have fun with it. Um, I think
Like
there's something relatable in a deeply problematic way.
I can feel that.
Yeah. In the way that, like, when you look at a child's doodles, they're really, really fucked up when you take them at, like, face value, and then you're like, oh, wait, but, like, a 4-year-old drew this. Um, that's the
There was a
feeling I
different
get.
understanding and appreciation for art back then.
Exactly. Um,
Yeah, which is why I say it's a little off nowadays.
yeah, totally. All right. Well, we're at an hour and 11 minutes, which is basically our mark. And also, I need to do a version of this with you in the flip position, and I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
monopolize all of the material. So, I'm going to say this was probably a pretty good one. And
Thank you, man.
then, whenever you want to do me, we'll set that up.
Oh yeah, really complete the two snakes eating each other's assholes out.
There you go. Just num 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 num. Um,
Num 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 game design.
exactly. Just the human centipede of game design interviewing.
Oh, I don't like that.
Well, there you
Oh
go.
god. Oh,
You're
that feels like
welcome.
the worst version of any designer sharing the same dollar. Fuck.
Yeah, exactly. The same
Oh,
$20 going around between indie designers is just the human centipede.
oh, Christ. Christ. I want you to know that. I'm so glad that people are going to be able to hear you say this.
Mm.
Oh my god.
It was going up on YouTube by the end of the day. So,
Oh, thank.
um,
Good.
I'll
Good.
I'll send you the link, and if you want, I'll find the timestamp so you can just clip that part.
Oh no, I have nothing I've said here. I want to remove. So like, I'll
Fair.
make it very easy on you. Just post it as is. Honestly.
Love it. Makes my job easier.
Oh yeah.
All right, dude. Well, yeah. I'll DM you in a minute. All right.
Cool thing, man.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.